Here we are with our panel discussion on tonight's Alona Show. While the rest of the world has been struggling, China announced a growth of 8.7% in 2009. And analysts have said that it's now the world's second largest economy. They overtook the U.S. as the largest auto market and passed Germany as the biggest exporter, and they seem to be soaring in every way. But could China be the next bubble that's waiting to burst? Are they overexpanding? And are they about to reach a peak? And if so, how might that affect us all? Well, here to figure it all out with me, I have Stephen Yates from the Asia Advisory. And from our New York studios, we have Joseph Wiesenthal from the Business Insider. I want to thank you both for being here and for being in New York. Now, first, can you tell me, what do you think are the sectors of the Chinese economy that perhaps could be the most vulnerable? Now, we'll start with Stephen here.
There are actually several areas that could be vulnerable. I mean, I'd have to say at the top level, one of the greatest challenges we have with China is a lack of transparency in areas that are unlike any other major economy in the world. I mean, if China as a country were a stock, it would not be able to be listed on most of our markets because of the lack of transparency we have into the health and well-being of some of its institutions. So that's the number one uncertainty we have. I think, ironically, one of the most vulnerable areas of its economy has been what people have seen as its strength, the export-oriented industries of China. That has been seen by some as being an engine of global growth. But from my point of view, what it's been has been a central kind of cog in sort of American or broader Western investment and American and Western consumption. Obviously, over the last year or two, there's been a real downsizing of American investment and consumption. I have to believe that there's a systemic impact on China. But one of the miracles of the kind of government that they have is they can continue to have 8.7% growth because that's what they say it is. And it could be true or not. I think it's very, very difficult for anyone to say they have just knocked down, dead right economic statistics about where China is.
And let's, Joseph, could you care to chime in for us?
Yeah, I think there are a couple areas that are specifically vulnerable that you could focus on. And one is their real estate market, which is booming in all of the major cities. The amount of commercial real estate that's going up is insane. You have a lot of the telltale signs that you saw here during our real estate bubble. Property developers holding back units, middle class families thinking they should get into buying extra homes or condos as a speculation or investment. Lots of red flags there. And then another area that you should be concerned about would be, say, like their steel sector, which is characterized by lots of state-funded enterprises that they can't really close for political reasons because that would lead to layoffs and a slowing of the economy. Yet the overcapacity there is massive. They have more capacity in the steel sector alone than they consume, plus they're consuming steel from other parts of the world. So those are two areas where it's classic bubble. The government wants to probably slow them down. They want to shut down some of these state-run steel makers, but they really don't have the guts to actually do it. And again, same with real estate. They want to cool it a little bit, maybe like we did when we saw the warning signs, but when they actually look at the ramifications of that, they're too scared to do what it will actually take.
But do you think that they really are seeing the warning signs here? Are they just putting a front up for the rest of the world and saying, look at us, we're still growing, we are going to be #1 eventually, but they secretly, they know that they could possibly be facing a burst soon?
My perception has been that Chinese leaders, when they're dealing with us, sort of behave on two levels. On the one hand, there's a little bit of hubris. They don't mind the United States appearing to go through a tough patch and sort of saying we're tired of outsiders coming and lecturing us on the way we ought to be doing things. At the same time, they behave in a way that they seem more concerned about the fragility and durability of their economy than a lot of outside experts are. I mean, I'd say the broad consensus among China experts, and even a lot of people in the economic field, where I would be a minority, is that they see this going on forever. And to me, I just think that's ahistorical. No economy goes on with double-digit growth forever. No economy avoids adjustments, crises, or even some kind of bubble at some point. And I just find very little built into the Chinese system to be prepared to deal with that. I can't say when it would come or which kind of economic challenge it might be, but I just find it ahistorical to think that they would be somehow without this challenge.
Joseph, do you...
That's right.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I think that's right. To that point, we could talk about there being a bubble in real estate or steel overcapacity or whatever else, but we don't really know when it's going to burst. I mean, people were calling for the housing bubble in the United States to burst or slow down even before the year 2000, and then it went on at least another 7 or 8 more years. So when we have these discussions about what are the vulnerable parts of the Chinese economy, it's easy to identify warning signs, and again, I do also think that the Chinese government is very concerned about them. But they can go on forever. We really have no idea when there will be a day of reckoning or what will be the trigger that makes it happen.
Okay, but let's assume that this Chinese bubble does indeed burst, and sooner than we think. What could possibly be the repercussions, not only for the U.S., but for the world over, if this Chinese economy were to go down?
Well, I mean, my expectation would be, one of the few lessons I remember of Economics 101 is that there are a lot of things built into expectations. And I think that the world has been acculturated to expect that China is going to keep on growing at these high rates and it's going to be an engine for global growth. I think there's a lot of inaccuracy in some of those assumptions, but that's what I think a lot of markets have built into their assumptions. And so I think one of the big challenges would be shock in a lot of markets. There would probably be panic in stock markets around the world. There'd be panic in governments trying to think about what's going on. There'd be panic in sort of the assembly and sort of supply chains of companies who have been using China as a platform to export to other parts of the world. In reality, my guess is, this would be a major disruption and certainly would be costly. But the truth is, the international companies who are manufacturing from China can do that from elsewhere. It would be costly, but we used to do it from elsewhere. And so if it got to a point where things were truly broken in China, we needed to find alternatives, it would hurt us less than it hurts China.
I think to add to that, one thing, we don't really know how it's going to go down, what it would mean. But, there are various scenarios we could imagine. For example, if China's imports of commodities collapse, which could happen because they've built up such a huge stock, that would slam countries like Brazil and Australia. And Australian foreign exchange markets, the currency markets there, have been one of the hottest areas for speculators to play into. So there could be this chain reaction, the likes of which we have no real idea how it would play out. So what would happen if people started selling off the Australian dollar like crazy after having such interest in it? I don't know. That might be the scary part. We really don't know what the domino effect would be like.
But where does China's holdings of U.S. currency reserves, where does that come into play then in this scenario? Would that save them, or quite the opposite, would that bring them down, since the U.S. currency also right now is not exactly stable?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not an expert on how people can and cannot use currency reserves, but my understanding is it's not quite like holding cash. I mean, they can't just go out and buy a lot of things with it or flood their economy with it. If they wanted to, say, do things to increase supply in their own economy, that would mean changing dollars into their own currency, and that would increase demand for their currency, the value of their currency, and make their exports more expensive, which probably would be harmful to their economy. And that may go to the limits of my economics in trying to understand what this kind of holding of currency reserves might do if someone wanted to try to sell. The other thing is, when you hold so much and you want to sell, who's going to buy all of that? And at what price? And how much will you lose in trying to dump those kind of reserves if they wanted to try to use them strategically? So my impression is this is not really very much of a strategic weapon for them, and it is not necessarily a boon to their domestic development.
Mm-hmm. Joseph,
right.
We have about 30 seconds for you here.
Yeah, the benefits of holding huge forex reserves is vastly overstated. If you look on Japan held huge forex reserves before their bubble burst. We had huge foreign exchange reserves before the Great Depression in the 30s. So the 2 times countries have had such a massive amount, it didn't protect them from going into very deep, prolonged slides. I don't think it'll help China if they have a bust.
All right, I want to thank you both. This is a long conversation, obviously. We didn't have enough time to really get into it, and I hate to paint a gloomy, doom-gloom scenario, but many people are saying that China's economy could be facing a bubble burst. All right, that's it for tonight's show. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to come back tomorrow. We'll ask if the U.S. is overdoing it with Iran. They've been launching an offensive from every single side imaginable. But does that weaken the bite? And CPAC kicks off tomorrow. We'll show you the hilarious ways that the Conservative Conference is trying to reach out to the young people. And also, don't forget that I will be in Vancouver on Friday to give you a live report from the Russia House in the Olympic City. In the meantime, don't forget to become a fan of The Ilona Show on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. Coming up next, we have the news with all of the latest headlines from both the U.S. and around the world. Thank you, Stephen.